Media Talks, the podcast that helps to better understand the world of media and video advertising.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Media Talk podcast. I'm Emmanuel Josserand, aka Manu, and I lead Comcast Advertising's advocacy and thought leadership efforts in Europe. My guest today is Freddy Clapson. Freddy, hello. Hi. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Manu. Thank you for having me. Absolute pleasure to be here.
And it's great to have you as well. So, Freddy, you have a very long title, so I'm going to make it. I'm going to try and make it. So, Managing Partner, Global Programmatic and Innovation Lead at TMX.
Yeah, that's all of it. It's an amalgamation of two, but okay. Yeah, that's spot on.
So, in fact, I was going to say maybe not everyone is kind of maybe familiar with TMX and with yourself. So, maybe it would be good to have just a quick intro. First about you and then about TMX.
Yeah, of course. So, I've been in programmatic industry for about 10 years. I used to work at Mindshare and Media IQ, or MIQ now, and V Interactive, for those that remember that very infamous company about a decade ago that got in the Financial Times. But as you mentioned, I'm currently at TMX, which is the bespoke integrated creative network and media agency built by Omnicom for Mercedes Benz. You can tell I've learned the script. Essentially, it's a full integrated advertising as a service proposition that we built for Mercedes because they wanted everything all in one place. So about 4 years ago, we won a massive pitch and we ended up buying 3 companies as part of it. We bought a creative agency called Anthony, an innovation agency called TLGG, and a PR agency called OSK. And now everything to do with organic and paid marketing for Mercedes Benz is run through TMX. So everything from creative ideation, storyboarding, production, post-production, adaptation, translation, and then media planning, buying, optimization, reporting, innovation, insights, everything is all done by someone in TMX in 39 markets.
Okay, so fabulous. So this is truly a one of a kind agency. So there's a lot to unpack. I'm going to go back to the global versus local, which you mentioned earlier. But so as I understand, as a global marketing and comms agency for one of the world's most recognized luxury car, and you talked about some of those channels. How does the sort of budget gets divided between the various channels? For instance, where does TV sits overall in comparison to online, video, social, and so on?
So it very much depends on the market. So Mercedes works in a very federated, decentralized approach to how they decide their media buying. So a lot of guidance comes from global, but the budgets are set at a local level, and we match them one-to-one. So we have local TMX meeting with the local marketing directors in Mercedes, and they will decide, these are the budgets. So the role of TV is important, globally, because it's the big screen and it has the, in terms of some of the most memorable Mercedes Benz adverts, they are TV or F1. So, it still plays a big role, but the role within each market changes quite a lot. So in Italy, for example, it's still huge. In the US, it's still massive, especially when it comes to things like college football and some sports. But in other markets, it might be a little bit more nuanced, and then it flows with actual user consumption behavior. So, in places like India, where TV might be consumed more on your phone as a primary device rather than on your TV, it flows towards where the device is used and match the content in the environment rather than necessarily saying we need to be on TV because we're a TV company. It's where are the people that want to buy our cars, which can go into 6 and maybe even 7 figures in value. Where are they? How do we get to them and be in the right place?
Right. So how do you separate, when we talk about video, for instance, how do you differentiate the various vertical? Do you see it as a sort of total video, or you've got different silos and CTV, TV, and so on?
We try to combine it as much as possible. Our global guidance for connected TV is that TV is TV. The The connected part, frankly, is a back-end operation, and that is connected to the internet. The asset is identical. You can turn a TVC into a CTV ad just by trafficking it programmatically and running it like that. That, from a global perspective, that's where we see it. But obviously, in the local market, there's some nuance around buying. If your BVOD providers want to do it in a linear fashion, so be it. And if that's where the value is, then we'll take it. So it's slightly at the mercy of the markets. And I think anyone that's worked on a massive brand where every market has a little bit of nuance, your uniform media plan template quickly dissolves into something a little bit more fractured. But for us, it's the device is the device, and how do we get the best looking assets onto that screen to make sure that whenever people see a Mercedes Benz advertisement, they're seeing the best possible quality and the best possible ad.
Okay. I would say in the current very uncertain political, economic climate right now, I know that budgets are becoming tighter and tighter, and there's always like a need of proof of results. In fact, we talk about performance marketing. For you guys, what does performance means?
Performance marketing for Mercedes-Benz is ultimately around selling cars. Like the bottom line is the bottom line for them. The brand's going to look great, but if they're making a loss, it doesn't mean anything. So everything kind of ladders down to, are we selling more cars? And for them, it's digital leads. Like, are we enabling our consumers to complete leads, which can be test drives or contact forms online, to then push them further through the journey? So anything that can help them with that will obviously contribute in their media plans and will be included. So some of the developments that we've seen within connected TV, especially within like creative innovations, QR code integrations or shoppable formats, second device pushes, really helps to bring what was typically seen with linear TV as we can't even measure. We get our GRPs, we get the spend report, congrats, we've seen it on the TV, to actually how does this interconnect into our wider media plan, and that golden question of, does brand actually influence performance? Like, obviously we don't know completely, but we have a bit more of an answer now, which is helping us to keep that branding, or what was considered branding activity, on media plans, because it does actually provide an incremental boost to overall performance.
So you touch a point here in some ways it's quite interesting, because those new creative ad formats, I think, are quite exciting in some ways. In fact, it shows that as TV is kind of moving to connected TV or into streaming, do you see its role sort of changing and shifting to a more sort of performance-driven sort of channel?
Personally, I think that mindset shift from linear TV to CTV being more performance, I think is just around the capabilities and the fact that we throw in digital into the conversation. If you look at Netflix's original offering, where they go, okay, the CPM is going to be, whatever amount it was, I think it was like $65 CPM at the beginning, Barb sort of ratings, and like, we are a linear TV provider that happens to be a streaming platform. I think it was like the original conception of their product. Is an interesting way of people going the other way, whereas you look at everyone else and they've gone, no, we're going into programmatic and we're being connected, which has then turned it into a performance arm, which I think has pulled it away from where it's strongest, which is, this is the biggest screen that people have in the home, and outside of cinema and some digital out-of-home placements, is the biggest screen that they're going to have access to. Yeah. So make some high-res, impactful videos, chuck it on there, and kind of, give it everything that you've got. So, there are some things that help, and there's some sort of identity mapping that helps connect it in and have a bit more of an impact around overall performance. But I think that might be almost the cart before the horse from the industry of, we've turned in this programmatic, let's make it performance, when actually TV is TV. We can bring it back a little bit and keep it into its origins.
So, because Mercedes is a sort of global brand, but campaigns are sort of managed more locally, how do you manage the global versus local, and how do you work from a programmatic standpoint in particular? Do you work as a centralized programmatic activation hub, or is all done also at sort of a local level?
It's all done at a local level. Like all the buying, all the planning is done local to local, and our team, some of the markets don't like us too much because we're far away from the market and we're giving them advice at things that may not seem relevant, but that's how we've kind of built our team and our work. We don't tell our local teams, you should buy on this channel or this channel, because it would be wrong of us to do so. We go in and say, hey, we've looked at CTV, on Samsung and LG, now you can buy ads within the UI. This is an incremental space compared to linear TV, which we couldn't do that. So think about it. Or here's some of the audience targeting we have with CTV. Like we talk almost generically around the creatives and the programmatic plumbing, so then the markets can take it and do with it what they think is best. I'm never going to set up a local market PMP in Indonesia because it's not my place, and I think everyone would be annoyed if I did it. Like it's I don't want to do their job. They don't want me to do their job. I'm going to get out of the way. So it's arming them with the information to help them plan and buy better, easier, quicker, rather than saying you have to run on TF1 in France, as an example, or you have to run on Amazon Prime because it's shiny and new. With Mercedes, it's if it works, we'll keep using it, and if it drives performance, we will back it, and when it doesn't, we will stop. Everything is backed by data and by science.
Okay, by sort of measurement, and again, it's always that proof of performance, and if it works, then you carry on. We see a lot of budget shifting from TV to online. Is that the case for sort of a large brand that is doing in some ways probably a lot of TV as well? Is that the case for in your case as well, where you see the kind of the shift to sort of more digital platforms in general?
In some cases, but again, it's very much down to the local market. Like we know in Italy, TV is still king. Yeah. So we're talking to those guys semi-frequently, being like, how's the market changing? But if it's still TV is what they want, and importantly, if that's what the local Mercedes Benz director wants to look at, then it's like, then okay, we're going to be on TV, and that's how we'll do it. We always prompt when, the plumbing changes. So if a couple of new providers are available via a DSP, we go, hey, if you can plug it in here and do a PG deal, we'll get some efficiencies, it'll make everything work better. But ultimately, it's there are local market dynamics that influence things that we don't know about. The local market deals are available. If there's a financial incentive to keep it in linear, then and if everyone's happy, I'm not going to get in the way of that.
Okay, that makes sense. There's a question I wanted to ask, which I wonder how that you've been affected. So we've seen Google just did a U-turn on third-party cookies, and obviously reverted back to where we were about three years ago. Will this affect how you sort of target and reach your audiences, or how you optimize your campaign?
No, honestly, I think from an outsider looking at how Google have managed that situation, there's some learnings from all sides around what that communication has kind of looked like. But I think the result of it has been that a lot of innovation outside of that, and the developments in cookieless technology that have been a result of those announcements have meant that our targeting has changed and has improved. Regardless of what Google say around undeprecating the cookie or whatever they're calling it now, turning it into a USP in Chrome, I guess, because everyone else is taking it off, which is a funny way of doing product development. But if they're, it's no longer ubiquitous, so we have to find other ways of having true, universal identification, or just finding ways that we can stitch these things together. So for us, we've been testing for years on various types of different cookieless identifiers, some of it being contextual translations of audience signals, some of it being other identifiers that, it could just even be something as simple as we're just going to do contextual buys, and it's going to be almost old school panel-esque. We're looking for these people, these publishers line up with it. That's how we're going to buy. And then sometimes there's a mixture of all of it. when Google previously undeprecated the cookie, we had just finished our cookieless planning and buying guide, which we had scoped because of the original decision to deprecate the cookie. And then, we completed it, got it signed off, and then a week later, they were like, oh no, we're going to keep them. And we're like, well, the work is still valid, but
yes. I mean, what has been done is, to some respects, most of the sort of the market has already done and sort of put their mind to doing without. Now that they are coming back, in some ways they can do without.
Yeah, and some of our analysis has looked into where does third-party cookies actually play a role. Like in CTV, I think the role of third-party cookies is largely in identification for identity graphs. It's not in targeting. It's not, obviously the CTV is a browserless environment. Digital out of home, largely the same. Audio is kept within apps, so cookieless applications there is rather prevalent. And then actually you don't necessarily need cookies for your awareness functions or your awareness campaigns. So actually your cookie approach is largely mid to lower funnel campaigns done in display, native and online video that isn't YouTube. So you've actually got so much space within your marketing campaigns that don't use cookies by design that, depending on what you're trying to achieve, like if you don't have an online store to push to, do you really need cookies? You could probably plan just as efficiently without any cookie signal. And with what the developments that we've seen in the last 3 years, it's probably better off anyway. So, I think when Google made the first decision, Pandora's box was opened, and now the world has moved on regardless of what Google has decided to do with that tech or not.
What is, if you had a sort of, in some ways, what is the biggest problem you're trying to solve these days? If you had a magic wand and you would say, this is what I really want to happen, what would that be?
I mean, across the whole of Mercedes, I think it's, we're talking about cookies, I think a privacy safe solution to to tracking and, attribution, I think is something that a lot of advertisers are looking for. In terms of multi-touch point attribution, that we've seen some steps back in what that looks like. And then because all of these different cookieless identifiers don't have overall coverage, we're finding that advertisers are now struggling to work out how they do it, and we're seeing proxies and actual restrictions in what they are. And I think that also connects into the connected TV world. Excuse that pun, but as linear TV and connected TV or programmatic has blended together, we've seen the amount of opportunities actually exponentially increase. But in doing so, the standardization around that has also gone by the wayside slightly. You've got AV teams in some agencies that buy linear TV, and then you've got programmatic teams that buy connected TV. Sometimes the AV team does everything. Sometimes they do nothing and they don't exist. And then every different buyer, every different publisher has got slightly different standards. Even trafficking video creatives for some publishers now, it is tricky because there isn't a standardized way of doing it. We know CM360 is there for standard creatives, and that's fine. But for TV, it's ad collision is far more obvious to spot and far more annoying. So because if you've watched the same ad 12 times in if you've done a mini binge and watched 4 episodes and the only thing you've seen is the same ad, the only response is negative.
Yeah.
So I think some standardization around what the connection between linear and connected TV buying and trafficking looks like, I think will help solve a lot of problems and make the processes a lot easier. Because if that happens, if that standardization happens, I think just buying as a whole and education will become far easier. We know some agencies have old school linear TV buying teams, and it's what do they do as more of this falls into a digital space? And I think if we meet somewhere in the middle, they will become far more engaged to participate and then actually become open up to more of the programmatic world than necessarily what we've seen, which is some BVOD going in one direction, some going in another, which then just creates this divergency that then makes it far more difficult to plan effectively.
And there's also this complication between the various regions as well, because it's not even working everywhere the same. So that makes from a global perspective, makes this even more complex.
Yeah, even in Europe, you look at some of the standards in even just creative trafficking, and what is allowed on TV. I know the UK has got certain rules around, healthy foods and sugar and alcohol and everything like that.
Yeah.
There's obviously not suggesting that advertising regulation needs to be standardized globally, but just some consistency there will help to make sure that if you've got a centralized buying team, you traffic in 2 or 3 places and then it's okay. I know some BVOD publishers support on that, Clearcast in the UK, where some providers will do that for you and eliminate that issue, but it's that friction. But it is, every time you dig a little bit deeper, you find that there's more and more nuance, which then means that a universal application becomes far more difficult.
Thank you, Freddy. We've reached the end of our discussion, but before we wrap up, I've got one more thing, because I tend to ask the same question to all my guests at the end of the discussion, and ask them to share something that they deeply care about, or one of their biggest wish for the next 12 months.
Oh, that's a good one. Does it have to be around CTV, or can it be general?
It can be anything.
Okay. Something that's always close to my heart is around mental health. The first thing that I have with my team, the first question I ask in our one-to-ones is, how's your mental health? How are you? Like, there's always like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. Really? How are you? And dig into it, because I've had my own mental health, episodes. I've had burnout a couple of times and depression and everything. So I go, you only do good work when you feel like a good you. Yeah. There's going to be good days and bad days, but if you feel like you're not quite right, work doesn't matter. Let's try and get to this in the time that we have, because I know that if we can settle whatever is unsettling you, the work is going to be better. Yeah. And the work that my team does, it's high amounts of research, time alone or independent thought. It's not necessarily repetitive tasks. It's original thinking. So if you're not in the right headspace to do it, selfishly, the work isn't going to be there. So and especially with agencies, and you look at the consolidation within the market, the news, like yesterday around WPP Media, and then all of the macroeconomic stuff, Trump continues to be Trump. The China is slowing down. We've everything within the EU, the India-Pakistan escalations, the new Pope. There's wherever you look, there's something that's kind of changing.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, anchor yourself where you can. Take the good. We're good as a team. Talk. Yeah. Be honest, and I'm honest with my guys. I'll be like, hey, today's not a good day. I might have headphones on a little bit longer than normal. I'm always here. Talk to me. And I think there's a little bit of leading by example by that. You can't always have a good day. Otherwise, they're not good days. They're just days.
Love it. That's great. Something we should think about a lot more, certainly. But thank you very much for sharing this, Freddy.
No.
Freddy, thank you. Great talking to you. Thank you for all your insights, and all the best for what clearly is going to be a very challenging few months ahead. And obviously, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and share. And if you like what we do, please rate us. It does help to raise our profile and continue to grow. So thanks again, and until the next time, goodbye.